Hello, listeners. We're Shedding Light, and I'm Candy.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Susie.
And we're hell-bent on shedding light on unsolved missing persons cases across Canada,
in an attempt to find the missing piece of the puzzle.
Exactly a year later, October 18th, 1991, her and
Jack
came to visit me. And when they left that day about, I remember it was 3:20 because I have a diary. And they left, and I have never seen Chris since. I don't think anybody has.
What you're about to listen to is the culmination of countless hours of research in an attempt to gather as many facts as possible about the case by reading news articles, online blogs and forums, and by interviewing friends, family, and people involved in the case. We will discuss different theories and possibilities and pick them apart in order to evaluate their likelihood, or better yet, eliminate them. We weren't there. We don't claim to know what happened. We can only try to paint a picture using the resources that we do have. We don't claim anything to be fact that isn't. We don't claim our interviewees' words to be fact. It's their memory. It's their recollection. It's their truth, and it's their opinion. And everybody's entitled to one. That does not mean we necessarily share any of these opinions. And listeners, please remember, everyone, including the suspects, is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Please bear that in mind as we welcome you to
Season 6, Episode 1, The Mysterious Disappearance of Kristina Rhodes. Produced in partnership with Please Bring Me Home and sponsored by Bruce Power. Situated on the shores of Lake Huron, Bruce Power embraces diversity and inclusion, as they know this is how they will innovate and grow for the future. Building a workforce that is both diverse and inclusive is essential to them. At Bruce Power, there are limitless opportunities to pursue multiple career paths and take on exciting new challenges, all while enjoying a small-town lakeside living.
Just a heads up that there is some foul language and adult content in here. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, listeners. Holy smokes, it's been a while, and oh, how we've missed you. We hope you all are starting off 2023 with peace, good health, and hope for the missing and their families. And really, the only excuse we have for our absence is that we've all been very busy with our own lives and family, while still working behind the scenes on all of our previous cases when new information presents itself. We took a little breather in between seasons to regroup and refocus. Angela has continued to volunteer her time as an investigative team member with Please Bring Me Home and is currently assigned to 4 cold cases. So lots of work she's been doing. She can never be found without her notebook, her face in her laptop or her phone, working every angle. Great job, Ange. One case in particular, the case of Luc Jolly DeRoche from Season 2, has us completely absorbed, and we have dedicated much of our time to the investigative side, collaborating with our team members, Joanne LeBlanc, the admin for Luc's Facebook page, and Brett Robinson, Director of Case Analysis with Please Bring Me Home. Whether it be boots on the ground, road trips, interviewing in person, over the phone, sifting through tips and old conversations, or conducting searches, we have not and will not stop until we can bring closure to this case. Luc's case is one where there is an enormous amount of information being shared from willing parties. Unfortunately, this season's case is the complete opposite. The case of Kristina Tamara Rhodes. To put things into perspective, Angela and I grew up approximately an hour from where Kristina was last seen over 31 years ago, and I can honestly say that I have never heard of her before becoming acquainted with Please Bring Me Home. It's just so odd to me that her case didn't receive any media attention. A little later on, we will share why we and others believe that authorities did not take her disappearance as a serious matter.
Kristina Tamara Rhodes was born October 9, 1973. At some point, her father, Dean Rhodes, and her birth mom split up. and her mother remarried. Collins was her stepfather's last name, which Kristina often used. Kristina lived in Owen Sound, Ontario, the same birthplace as Susie and me, until she was taken into foster care by Wendy Starenchuk and her husband on August 24, 1989, when Kristina was just 15 years old. The Starenchuks resided in Southampton, which also happens to be Susie's and my hometown. So this case literally hits home for us. It impacts anyone really who can relate to a small town where you think everyone knows everyone and nothing bad can happen. Candy, you're also from a small northern Ontario town, so you can relate too, right?
Absolutely.
Wendy so kindly obliged us with an interview so you could hear her recollection of the events leading up to Kristina's disappearance. Although she was not familiar with what a podcast was, she agreed to be part of it once we explained it. She said she would do anything if it would help locate Kristina.
October 18th, 1990, Kristina left the Starenchuks and may have gone into another foster home in Hanover. This is where she met up with Jack. At least this is what we will call him throughout the podcast to protect his identity. And they soon began dating. Wendy believes that they knew each other from high school. Coincidentally, Jack had been the Starenchuk's first foster child, so they knew both Kristina and Jack very well. Wendy recollected Kristina's character when she came to live with them.
Yes, it was August 24th, 1989. She was 15. She was from Owen Sound, which isn't that far from here, about an hour. She was pretty happy-go-lucky most of the time, great sense of humor. She skipped school a lot, things like that some teenagers do. But on the whole, she really didn't give us any problems. I had younger foster kids in care, too, at that time. And she would even take them to the doctors or dentist if she had the day off or whatever. I don't think she had a happy home life, at least when she got older. But I don't remember ever meeting her mother. Her father had left. I don't know when. She didn't talk about him. She would talk about her stepfather in a nice way sometimes. But other than that, she really didn't mention family very often. And she seemed to be, I would say, kind of lonely because a lot of it was her choice, but most of our teenage foster kids would like to go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night or whatever. But Chris, most of the time, would rather sit home with my husband and I and watch TV, and Chris didn't have a lot of interest. We'd visit for hours at the kitchen table, I do remember.
According to Wendy Starenchuk, Kristina seemed to change somewhat after she began dating Jack, but kept in touch on the phone and would come by and visit a lot.
She started dating, actually, our first foster child. She changed a bit after that, but she still kept in touch.
It is believed that the two of them couch surfed and were homeless for a period of time until they got an apartment in Hanover, about an hour's drive from Southampton. On August 9th, 1991, Kristina gave birth to a baby girl that they named Brittany. We were fortunate enough to speak with Kim, Jack's foster mom, who was very close to him, and she recalled the events leading up to Kristina's disappearance.
Jack
was not living with us, but there was nights he would call me and they were cold, they were hungry. So I would go and pick them up and they would come, they would spend the night at our place, hot meal, hot bath, and then they'd be gone again. Yes, mostly Port Elgin. I do remember him calling me and he was quite upset. They had been staying in the vestibule in one of the banks in Port Elgin, and someone, I don't believe it was the police, but they had told them, gotta move on. They did come out and they were both very excited that she was pregnant. My reaction to them was they couldn't take care of themselves. They couldn't take care of a baby. They were both thrilled though. And it was a case of, they both thought, here's a body that's going to love us. No matter what, this kid's going to love us. And I told him it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. There was times that they were gone and I didn't know where they were, how they were doing, how to get a hold of them, because neither one of them had a phone that I am aware of. And so it was when
Jack
needed me, he would call. He had called and told me that they had the baby. I didn't get a chance to go over to see him. My dad was dying of cancer at that time. And I also had my own 2 kids, my husband, his brother, and 4 teenage foster boys. Plus I worked full time.
On October 18th, 1991, exactly 1 year to the day she left foster care at the Starnchucks, Kristina and Jack hitchhiked over to Wendy's for a visit. During that visit, Wendy witnessed them arguing about whether to keep the baby or not. At that time, the baby had been placed in foster care and Kristina was contemplating giving her up for adoption, which Jack was not in favor of. They left the Starnchuck residence at 3:20 p.m. and Wendy and her husband have not seen Kristina since.
No, she wasn't happy. She wasn't happy. Her and her boyfriend, they had an argument. And it was about whether they should keep the baby or not. You see, the 2 of them had the 2-month-old baby when she went missing. You see, it's funny. I remember that day like it was yesterday.
Jack
Said something about the baby. He said something about keeping the baby. And Chris said, we can't keep the baby with you being in and out of jail all the time.
Jack
Said, well, he said, you won't see her first steps. You won't see her first haircut. And then they really got into it because, you see, if you'd have been here, Chris was sitting in the chair looking down. She never looked up. She looked down. She was saying things to
Jack
but she looked down. And I can almost read her mind. I think it was like, I'd love to keep her, but I can't. Yeah, I had to stop them from arguing. October 18th, 1991, her and
Jack
came to visit me. And when they left that day about, I remember it was 3:20 because I have a diary. And they left, and I have never seen Chris since. I don't think anybody has.
Wendy believes that Jack was going to a different destination after they left her home and that Kristina would have carried on by herself. She also believed that they had hitchhiked as they had shown up on foot that day. In the following month, Wendy recalls Jack telling her that once he got to his destination, Chris said, "See you on Monday." Jack called Wendy in November and asked if she had seen Chris and said that she did not show up to court. We refer to Kristina as Chris because that's what Wendy refers to her as. Jack
phoned me in November to ask me if I'd seen Chris. And I said, no, I haven't. You? Anyway, he hadn't seen her for a while, and she was due to go to court. And
Jack
I wanted to remind her to go to court, and I think that was to give the baby up. But she didn't show up.
Jack
Went elsewhere. That day they left here. So she would continue on hitchhiking by herself. And who knows? Anybody could have picked her up. He told me that when he got to his destination, Chris said, "Bye, I will see you Monday." That's what
Jack
he told me.
Contradictory to this timeline is an event that occurred involving both Jack and Kristina after their visit to the Starnchucks, which we will elaborate on in just a minute. All news stories report that she was last seen by her boyfriend Jack and her foster mother. There have been no official sightings past this date, although there have been some unconfirmed reports that she was seen after this date. No one, to our knowledge, has ever heard from Kristina. It just baffles me still that we lived in this area for so many years and we never ever heard of her as a missing person. Like, it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
It freaks me out. Like, do you remember that at all, Ange?
Very vaguely. And when I saw her picture, she looked familiar. And I thought, how could I not recognize her if she grew up in the same little town we did? She was a few years younger, obviously, but still.
Right. She went to the same school we attended. And yeah, it freaked me out that I really didn't know anything about it.
Well, and her stepdad was one of my teachers in public school.
Yes, I came to know that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And actually her foster mother lived down the street from our home. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty ironic too. And one could only assume that authorities did not take the matter seriously because of her past, which we will also discuss a little later on.
So getting back to the timeline of events, one thing that stood out to us was that Wendy said Jack told her he never saw Kristina again after he got to his destination that day. He did not mention to Wendy that he and Kristina got into another fight at their apartment that same evening, and one could only assume the argument may have been over their difference of opinions on whether or not to put their baby up for adoption. Perhaps he was simply embarrassed of his actions and wanted to spare her any more anguish. Who knows? But what we do know as fact is that Jack was arrested the evening of Friday, October the 18th, 1991, for assaulting Kristina and transported to the Walkerton jail approximately 10 kilometers from Hanover. Jack's statement indicates that Kristina showed up to Walkerton jail on Friday and was supposed to come again on Monday, but she never showed up. So I guess that was to visit him. Is that correct, Susie?
From what Brett Robinson has shared, she came, I guess, to discuss, I guess, the arrest and what took place that night. And yes, I guess she was supposed to show back up on the Monday to visit him and never came.
A missing persons report was officially filed by Jack in January 1992. He indicated to Please Bring Me Home that he was incarcerated at this time, so he made the filing with assistance from some of the officials where he was being held. His foster mom, Kim, has her own recollection of this event, which she shared with us.
Jack
had, I believe it was 3 days after he was released, he had called me, was very upset. He had gone to Hanover to the police department, and when he told them that she was missing, she was always there. You know what I mean? Like, they fought like cats and dogs, but they always got back together. They loved each other the best the two of them knew how to. When she wasn't there, he started panicking. She would always come back. He would always go back to her. She would always come back to him. They did. They loved each other very much. He went to the police. He told them she was missing. Because he had assault charges on him from her, they were not going to give him any information. So I went and got him, and I went with him to the police department and said, look, don't give us any information, but please check and make sure she's okay. We gave him Wendy's number. We gave him Children's Aid's number. It was just, she's a runaway. The night he was put in jail, his one call, he called me. And then it was either 2 or 3 days after that he called and was panicked that she wasn't there.
Wendy, of course, still feels bad that she never reported it herself. But Jack told her it had to be done by a blood relative, and she did not know any different at the time.
Well, I don't think it was even reported for a long time. See, I wanted to, and I guess I was pretty naive because
Jack
told me, no, you can't report her missing because you're not blood. You have to be blood. And I said, oh, I didn't know that, so I never reported poor Chris. I could have done it so much sooner.
Jack
Finally did, I think. And maybe
Jack
really thought that you had to be blood, but of talking to a police officer, and he said, oh no, and anybody can report a missing person, he said.
I just want to say that it is tough for us to have the exact facts so many years later. There may be some conflicting accounts of certain events, but everyone involved in this podcast did their best to recall everything. It's safe to assume that the truth that lies somewhere in between and really is not important to her disappearance.
A missing persons report was filed by her boyfriend in January of 1992. He was incarcerated at this point. So he entered jail around October 18th. And then in January of 1992, he filed a missing persons report with the help of some of the officials that worked with him. And at that point, detectives had showed up to interview both him as well as both of their foster mother. At various points, both he and Kristina had stayed with a woman in Southampton who was their foster mother. And this woman actually kept meticulous diary notes, which proved useful to us later on.
That was a clip with Brett Robinson, Director of Case Analysis for Please Bring Me Home, who also oversees Kristina's case. After the report was filed, detectives showed up to interview Jack as well as both Jack and Kristina's foster mothers. Jack called Kim one night from the Hanover police station and told her he had been arrested for hitting Kristina after she threw an ashtray at him. He told her that it was a mutual fight, but because she had baby Brittany, it was decided that he would go to jail. Currently, it is unclear the exact date that Jack was actually incarcerated. We know he was arrested the night of October 18th, 1991, but was he actually locked up that night and onward or released in between his arrest and incarceration? Please Bring Me Home has confirmed that he spent roughly 8 months in jail throughout 1991 and into 1992.
Jack called me. They had been in a fight and he had been arrested. The cop said, one of you are going to get arrested. Which one wants to go to jail? It was decided because of the baby that Jack would go to jail. Now, from what I remember, he said it was a mutual fight. I don't know what the fight was over. I never asked. I asked him if he was all right, if she was all right, if the baby was all right. And he said he had a small cut that she had thrown an ashtray at him. He went to jail. As far as I knew, she was still at the apartment with the baby. The next day, he called me and said he had been told that she had turned the baby over to Children's Aid. Then he had asked me if I would come and get the baby from Children's Aid, because we're still fostering at the time, so we were all cleared and everything. I had just had a tubal pregnancy. I was dealing with my dad dying. I had my hands full. So my husband and I talked it over, and we said no. The baby, her name was Brittany at the time, had been placed in a foster home already. We thought, she's safe, she's okay. We felt it was better. If I had to save somebody,
Jack
was more of an issue to help than what the baby was. So he wanted me to take her and said we could adopt her, and that when he had his shit together, he'd come back and get her. He wasn't going to get his shit together. He was not, he still hasn't.
Jack told Kim that Kristina had gotten a check for $1,000 and that it was on the table when he was arrested. His mom and stepdad cleaned out the apartment, and when he later received the contents of the apartment, the check was not there.
When he was talking to me, he said the night that they had the fight, Chris had gotten a check from Mother's Allowance, Welfare, one of them, for $1,000. That check was on the table when he was arrested, because he said, he even said to Chris, make sure that doesn't disappear. His mom and dad went into the apartment after he was arrested, and Chris didn't show up, and Jack told me they had put all of their stuff into a storage unit. I don't know where it was, but when he went to get the stuff out of the storage unit, the check was not there. I want to know where that check is.
This story is also confirmed by Wendy.
Because she had money waiting for her, like at home, and she didn't pick it up.
Oh.
Now, I would think if she planned on leaving, surely she'd go pick her money up first.
So what are your thoughts, girls? My thoughts are that if you wanted to voluntarily vanish, you would at least equip yourself with money for sure, and clothing and other resources to be able to sustain yourself for a period of time, because you need to find work and a place to live.
For sure.
And yeah, right. And if you intended to leave for a long time, you would absolutely go as prepared as possible. So I wonder if she did take the check and cash it somewhere, because it wasn't in the belongings when you got everything back. And $1,000 31 years ago would have gotten you pretty far. You would, if you think about it, like
probably pay a couple of months rent, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And I wonder if it was investigated at the time.
Well, you would think that he would be able to find out if the check was cashed or not, who it was from. He knew who it was from. Was it ever cleared? We don't know that.
No, nobody seems to know. It's like no one looked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's way too late now to go back and try to figure this out.
Yep.
And I would think you would at least reach out to those you trusted most to let them know you were okay. It does not make sense to me. But then again, we have seen crazier things where people have been found safe and sound 14 years later and simply did not want to be found. But then I keep thinking of how heartfelt Wendy was and how close she was to Kristina. You would think she would at least call her if she could.
She was no stranger to the streets or to hitchhiking, that's for sure. I mean, maybe she decided to take off for a bit after placing baby Brittany in foster care. It would have to have been a very upsetting thing for her to deal with. Both Wendy and Kim said she wanted to keep the baby. Wendy sensed Kristina felt it would be in the baby's best interest to have a stable family life and not a father who was in and out of jail. Who is to say she didn't get picked up and that's when something happened? She could literally be anywhere.
Oh my God, I think of how often we used to hitchhike around like that same area
All the time.
when we were kids. Like
We were
right
lucky.
outside of, I know, right outside of where our mother worked. We'd hitchhike to high school sometimes, or just over to Port Elgin to go hang out.
Yeah.
And
You never thought of the bad because it was a
No.
normal thing back then. Everybody hitchhiked.
Yep. We were just really, really lucky. Nothing bad ever happened to us. Of course, the last people to see someone alive are always suspects, and without knowing all the facts in the timeline, many people may have assumed that Jack had something to do with Kristina's disappearance. But Kim believes 100% that he had nothing to do with it, and believes that he loved both Kristina and Brittany very much. After all, he was in jail, and he would have at least told Kim if it were an accident or a fight. She was his support, and he trusted her.
He was as close to me as my own children. He always knew we were there. He always used us as support. If he had been in any way responsible for Chris disappearing, I would have been the first person that he would have come to and told, and he didn't. I 100% in my heart believe he had nothing to do with it. Right to this day, he's still looking for her. And like, to me, that's still another thing that if he had done something, you think he would be like low key. He wouldn't talk to people about it. He wouldn't, right? Like, you wouldn't keep bringing it up. And out of all of the things that Jack did, he wouldn't lie to me about it. The kid, I love the kid. 100%. I trust that kid with my life. If it came to a burning building and I was in there and he was outside, 100% he would come and get me. Okay? And he loved her more than he loved me.
Kim believes police fumbled the case right from the beginning, as they did not consider Kristina to really be missing. With both Kristina and Jack having had a history of running away, and Jack having assault charges on him, they simply dismissed it. She says Hanover police now say there was never a report of Kristina missing, but she was there when they reported it.
Baby Brittany was later adopted, and her new family renamed her Alana Hatt. As Alana grew into a young teen, she often wondered about her birth parents. I imagine she wondered, who were they? Where did they live? How old were they when they had me? And why did they give me up? After many discussions, her adoptive mother revealed her birth name as well as her birth father's name. She eventually met Jack, and he gave her Kristina's name and said that no one knew where she was. But Alana had a suspicion that there was more to this story. This is what prompted her to want to find out what happened to her mother. And so she contacted Please Bring Me Home in 2018 to enlist their help. Founding members Nick Oldreeve and Matthew Knopper agreed to look into the case. But as they started to dig for information on Kristina, they were shocked when they could not find a single trace of her anywhere.
Initially, Please Bring Me Home went to the Walkerton Police Force to confirm her as a missing person, only to find that she had not been a missing person from 1991 to the present. So bizarre. We know she was reported missing, so what happened? Of course, this made the case even more intriguing, and they then began their investigation. Brett Robinson, Director of Case Analysis, joined Please Bring Me Home in April of 2021 and was assigned 3 cold cases from the roster at that point.
I joined Please Bring Me Home in April of last year, of 2021. I had been given 3 cases. Kristina was not one of them, but I ended up solving one of those cases and finding a person who had disappeared 14 years ago and closing that case. So I was given the Kristina Rhodes case, and I kind of threw myself into the investigation. Through interviews with both the ex-boyfriend, with the foster mother, with her friends, her family, I began compiling, I guess, a different set of evidence from what was originally thought.
Brett reviewed court documents along with some letters that were provided to him from Jack, and it was during that process he uncovered a letter from police in 1993. indicating that Kristina had been spotted in different locations in 1992.
The boyfriend actually gave me a huge amount of information, correspondence. He'd been in jail for 8 months back from 1991 to 1992, and he gave me a lot of correspondence between him and his family members, between him and law enforcement. And probably the most important thing that I found during that was a letter from a police detective. I think it was the Hanover Police Force, I believe, was the one holding the case at the time. A letter from a detective to him stating that Kristina had been seen in Port Elgin and Kitchener areas in the summer of 1992. And overall, it didn't state that they considered the case closed, but I think it likely that at that point they closed the case. Now, I reached out to this detective who's now retired. He vaguely remembers the case. This is a long time ago, right? 30, 31, 32 years ago. So he vaguely remembers the case. He doesn't remember exactly if it was closed or not. Any pursuit that we've had of the file of that case has been met with, unfortunately, with no file. And that is backed up by the case is currently held by the Washington OPP, and they indicate there is no case file from back in 1992. So that was really unfortunate. In my experience and in Please Bring Me Home's experience, there are a lot of case files that go missing, are destroyed, get caught in floods or fires and such from 30, 40 years ago. And so that is really unfortunate because it would have been nice to see that information.
At that point, the team certainly had their work cut out for them.
Join us for episode 2, where we will discuss the theories in Kristina's case.
If she's out there, is there anything you'd like to say to her?
Well, yeah, I would. I would like to tell her that we still love her and we still have the same phone number. Please call us.
If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Kristina Rhodes, Please Bring Me Home can be contacted via the email address pleasebringmehome@outlook.com or by calling their anonymous tip line at 226-702-2728. If you enjoy our podcast and would like to support our endeavors, a 5-star rating and or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts would be greatly appreciated. It really helps new listeners to find us. And we wouldn't ever turn down the offer of a coffee or maybe even a glass of wine. Helps tremendously to wet our whistle while recording. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Links to our coffee account, our Instagram and Facebook page can all be found in the show notes for this episode. Thanks for listening. We couldn't do what we do without you.
As always, this podcast is dedicated to the memory of Nolan Panchishan. We love you, Nolan.
Love you.
Love you.
The folk all around you, not believing it's real. How can this happen? So